The question was about the Shachach, and I said that the case of Shachach was specifically an act of leaving food on the kira, the way Chazal had it, in a way that was prohibited. Usually before Shabbos, this wouldn't be the right thing to do. And what happened was he told himself at the beginning he was going to leave this food on the kira, but before Shabbos, he will remove it, put up the blech, do something to make it permissible for that to remain on Shabbos, l'chatchila. And he forgot to do so. He came home from shul, and then he realized, oops, it's been here. So the question was, has his food become prohibited or not? And a case of mazid would have been if he had made this realization sometime before Shabbos, but I guess had made a cheshbonis in his head saying, you know what, I could get away with this, and if I start to try to do it, maybe I won't have time to go get to mincha, whatever it is. So that was the mazid case. And we did not have an answer, at least from Rabbi Chia bar Abba, who was asked this particular question. Instead, he gave an ambiguous answer. He said, with regards to cooking on Shabbos, can't eat the results on Shabbos if it was done intentionally. But if it was done on b'shogeg cooking on Shabbos, so the results can be eaten. Has a person cooked b'shogeg on Shabbos? He believes either that when he's cooking, it's not Shabbos. He was pretty certain of that case, or he knew it was Shabbos, but he believed that cooking is somehow permissible on Shabbos, which is surprising, but some people could forget it. I mean, I would imagine that this coming Shabbos, people might make that mistake. Why? Because the day before Shabbos is Yontif. And on Yontif, people are going to cook. And the next day, Shabbos is like Yontif. And yesterday I fried some fish in the morning, so why can I fry some fish today? So that's the mistake. And the question was, what do you mean? What was the lo shna? This ambiguity. Rabbi Chibar Arba said, well, with cooking has a strict rule. Shogeg, mutter, mazid, usr. We're talking about the results. What to do with the results, the product of the cooking. And we also said that there were those who saw that there's a leniency included here. That's Rabbi and Rav Yosef. They said it means a leniency here. When Rabbi Chibar Abba mentioned the one who cooks intentionally on Shabbos shouldn't be able to eat those products, it's because he did something on Shabbos. He took out a frying pan and he put some oil in there and he actually cooked on Shabbos. But in this particular case, Bar-Hayim, case we discussed, this fellow just did not adjust the kira, do what he was supposed to do before Shabbos, but the cholent that was already sitting there for a few hours before Shabbos has basically has created a passive problem. He is passively allowing the isser to happen. And by the way, passivity also is acknowledged as a sin in many cases. Just the usual rule is for the passive type of averas, we don't punish anybody. Also, sometimes averas that just involve using one's mouth, using one's words, but even then, someone can be punished for speaking. And he said, "Look, hi de lo ka'avid ma'aseh, the mezid nami yochal." In this particular case about the person who decided that when he realized that the cholent was on the kira and he didn't do anything to adjust it, so he just left it there and pretended like nothing was a problem, nothing was amiss. So he should not be penalized. He should be allowed to eat that, I guess, cholent, let's say, because usually that's what people eat on Shabbos, for lack of a better example. Rav Nachum bar Yitzchak said, Amar li'isura. No, he felt that what Rabbi Chia bar Abba was trying to teach was a prohibition in this case. Why? Mevashel hu delo ate li'arumei. A mevashel on Shabbos is not there trying to be a wise guy. If someone is actually cooking on Shabbos, he knows he's doing an avera. There's no case where he says, well, I was doing something that could ostensibly be permissible, but I made a mistake or I did too much. I went a little bit too far. Oops. There's no oops. If you're actually cooking on Shabbos, you have no excuse. So no one's going to cheat. Yarume, what's the best case that they give for Yontif, they say? What's the Yarume case? A person's already cooking on Yontif. You're not supposed to cook on Yontif for those who aren't supposed to be enjoying Yontif. Give an example. Well, cooking for non-Jewish guests. You're allowed to cook on behalf of the Jews, but you can't cook on behalf of the non-Jews. On Shabbos, a person could host a non-Jewish gentleman at his table, like Rabbi Yehuda Nasi himself did. Why? He's all the cooking has been done before Shabbos, at least if he's keeping the Torah. So there's no ha'arama here. But a person could say, I was cooking extra. People don't eat cholent on Yontif. What do we eat on Yontif? What do people eat on Yontif all the time? For Shabbos food, I have all sorts of examples. I guess on Yontif we eat steak. Why? Because you could do that right. In Yontif people eat steak, so throw an extra steak on for Joe Gentile, his neighbor. You can't do that. That's a harama. He says, no, I made it for my 6-year-old son. Your 6-year-old son's not going to eat a whole steak. We know what you're up to. So with regards to cooking on Shabbos, Chazal didn't see any room for people trying to play fast and loose with the rules. B'shogeg yochal. Therefore, if a person actually cooked b'shogeg on Shabbos, they permitted him to eat. Why? Honest mistake. He really thought it wasn't Shabbos. He really didn't know there was any prohibition of cooking. But if he's already aware that Shabbos and it's prohibited to cook, he's not going to somehow try to find a loophole or something like that. So b'shogeg yochal. Aval hai, the case we are discussing, the fellow went to shul, forgot to do something with the kira and left the cholent on there all Shabbos, and then he tried to make it look like, I forgot. I really forgot. I didn't realize until I came home. No, we know you realized before you left the shul. Hi, the asi la'arume. In this case, he could say, no, I only realized once it was Shabbos. B'shogeg nami lo yochal. He should not be eating those products on Shabbos, and that's the penalty. So generally, we ask a kasha on just one of these sides, but the coming kasha is actually going to be difficult for both of these sides. Which are the sides? On one hand, we have Rabba and Rav Yosef, and on the other side, we have Rav Nachman and Bar Yitzchak interpreting Rabbi Chia Bar Abba's answer to the question that we have. Remember the names if you can't, so just write them down. I'll try to remember them and try to keep score because we're going to have a lot more names thrown into this picture soon. Meitiveh. So here's the kasha. This is the brisa. We're going to have to remember this also because this brisa has information in it that potentially contradicts or develops a kasha against what we found in the Mishnah. What's the Mishnah? The first Mishnah at the beginning of this parak. Rashi mentioned it. Masnisin dereish pirkin. The Mishnah that opened up this parak, and we've only had one Mishnah so far, but we're going to see contradictions. This brisa says, Shachach kidera al gabe kira uvishila b'Shabbat. He forgot the ketera on the kira before Shabbos, and it cooked, or he cooked it on Shabbos. B'shogeg yochal. This seems to answer the question. B'shogeg, really did forget this, so he can eat the products. B'mezid lo yochal. If it's a mazid case where really he left it there passively, and he was supposed to have come in, I guess, done gruf and ketuma, done something to permit the continuation of this kira with the kedera sitting on it into Shabbos, he should have done something before heading off to Beit HaKnesset Hanasi that Friday afternoon. So, by the way, this is going to be the Iker Kasha. They could have just asked. I'm wondering now if for the next bit we have we could ask, like the next stage in the Shaklavataria, we could bring more of this brisa. But for now, this is enough. This brisa is enough. But the brisa continues. We're going to continue reading more of this. B'amed devarim amurim. When was it stated? B'chamin shelo upamu kol tzarkan v'tavshil shelo bishel kol tzarko. We're talking about water that wasn't completely hot and a tavshil that wasn't cooked enough to, I guess, to be considered fully cooked. So these cases that the brisa just mentioned are cases of actual cooking on Shabbos. The actual cooking happens on Shabbos, by the way. If a person would take in either of these two types of things, chamin shelo hukumu kol tzarkan or tavshil shelo bishel kol tzarko, and actually put it on the kira on Shabbos, that would be the isser. That would be the isser of bishul. In this case, these two foodstuffs had just been on the kira before Shabbos, and they need to stay on the kira for a significant amount of time into Shabbos in order for their cooking to be completed. That's why it says they happen to cook on Shabbos. Why? You'd put them there maybe hours before Shabbos, but it's slow and it takes time, and the cooking actually happens on Shabbos. And like the Brisa says, b'shogeg yochal, b'mezid lo yochal. You have a question about that?
Talking about Shahiyah, right?
Yeah, Shahiyah, but allowing the Shia to happen lets this food become cooked. Okay, he left it on there, like I said, play it safe, 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Shabbos, but it will require the physics of this will require the food to stay on that kira, whether it's chamin shaluhu chamu kol tzarkan or tavshil shalo bishel kol tzarko. Both of those items would have to stay on this kira well into Shabbos in order to achieve the point that they are fit to be eaten the way someone wants it. I mean, water that's not fully heated is still edible. I would say it's edible, but it's not going to make you a cup of tea or a cup of coffee the way you like it. Why would that be the case? Because it's a large quantity. I don't know, when people use those electric urns, I dislike those for a number of reasons. The safety issue, they're expensive, they use a lot of electricity. They cost about 400 shekels to buy, and then they cost you every about 50 shekels to run every Shabbos. Quite a lot. They use a lot of electricity, whereas the platas cost a quarter of the price, and you could just put a large pot of water on them on Shabbos, and that also keeps the water hot enough, and the plata uses less electricity. Okay? And the plata also doesn't put a lot of water right near all the electrical gizmos. Okay, one of those electric water urns has a lot of electricity inside of it, and the water is very close to it, separate, but it's very easy for the water to get into where it should not. Whereas your plata, it's very hard if you have a proper kettle or pot of water on your plata for the water to get where the electricity is happening. So I'm a fan of those. Okay, my personal preferences aside, the point is that if he had one of these gigantic urns, he fills it. I don't know what's the capacity. The biggest ones could have how much? How much could you put in those? They could hold like well more than almost 10 liters sometimes. So if you just put it up, let's say even 2 hours before Shabbos, you press the switch, it says Shabbos mode. Shabbos mode in many other cases mean not rapidly boiling. Just turn on the heating element which allows it, if it was hot, to stay at about, I don't know, just below 100 degrees Celsius. But it takes a very long time for that water to get there, right? So that's this case we're discussing. So b'shogeg mutter and b'mezid lo yochal. And that seems to, by the way, that's a good answer to the question that they were looking for. B'shogeg mutter, right? That would have just been the answer to the question they asked Rabbi Chia bar Abba, this line. That would have just been the answer, right? That could have been satisfactory if they had been aware of this brisa. No, but it didn't. What? What did they ask Rabbi Chia bar Abba? Shachach keder al gabi kiruvish lo b'Shabbos mahu. And it could have just said, Tashma, Shachach keder al gabi kiruvish lo b'Shabbos b'shogi yochal b'mezid lo yochal. But we're not there. Why are we not there? Because Rabbi Chia bar Abba said something that was ambiguous, and there were two sides that gave parish to what Rabbi Chia bar Abba said.
And both of those sides don't agree with
yes,
this.
And both of those sides don't agree with this. Those sides trying to interpret Rabbi Chia bar Abba don't give an answer. I guess if we were trying to cut things short, historically, it could have been, if they had asked Rabbi Chia bar Abba, he could have told them, Tanai, we have a brisa that says, Shogeg yochal, mezid lo yochal. That could have been the end. But the problem was apparently, by the way, what is it about brisas? Brisas are outtakes from the Mishnayos, right? So they're not as well known. Some of them are not as authoritative. It's not like we hold the halacha isn't like every single brisa that's out there, by the way. Brisas shed light on rabbinic opinions that we find elsewhere, but it's not like every single brisa itself is a halacha. So we have here, the problem is this brisa's first statement, of course, doesn't fit exactly with either Rabbah and Rav Yosef on one hand or Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak on the other. So I'll take out my Gemara. Well, everybody here, we're still on this line.
This brisa disagrees with Chia bar Abba.
It disagrees with him?
Sure.
You think
But Chia bar Abba said that Shehiyah is lo shna, meaning that Shogeg and Nezid are the same din, and here they're making a distinction.
So I don't read, by the way, even though Rashi says when we read lo shna, v'hai de shachar dera, lo shna bein shogeg lemezid. It makes no difference bein shogeg lemezid. I was not reading it that way. I'll tell you why. Rabbi Chia bar Abba's statement is in Hebrew. Shachach keder al gabi kiru v'shla b'Shabbat Mahu, and he said, Lo midi, and then he answered, Am vash b'Shabbos b'shogeg yochal b'mezid lo yochal, v'lo shna. This answer, Am vash b'Shabbos, is Hebrew, and then lo shna, the word shna is Aramaic. So Rashi and you are reading it, and it makes no difference. And what's the and it makes no difference? It sounds like a strange thing. I read it as the quote from Rav Chia bar Abba, and his answer ends at yochal, and v'lo shna is, and he did not tell us anything. Okay, it was ambiguous. V'lo shna. He did not tell us that. So if you disconnect this word lo shna from the quote from Rav Chia bar Abba, then it means that he didn't address what we were addressing. But or at least he did address directly what we were trying to say.
Lo shna, the way you're interpreting it, would be a hey, not an aleph.
No, it would be an aleph because it's an Aramaic word. Yeah.
But the Aramaic word would be, how do you translate lo shna?
Lo shna,
He didn't teach it?
Yeah, or like lo tana. Okay, it would be like he didn't teach. Oh wait, hold on. Was that three?
There is no word shna.
Yeah, lo shana. Yeah.
That means to teach.
So, or in this case, or he didn't teach a distinction.
So
when the Gemara says lo shna this and lo shna that often, it means no distinction has been taught.
Agreed.
So he didn't teach a distinction. He didn't teach. Rabbi Chia bar Abba didn't teach.
He didn't mention anything about shehiyah.
Or at least explicitly, he was hinting at something, but he didn't distinguish. He didn't tell us enough here. V'lo shna means the narrator is telling Rabbi Chia bar Abba didn't shna. Yeah.
According to your approach, it doesn't. The story doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Well,
because they asked him a question and he didn't respond whatsoever to the question.
Or maybe he did. Maybe he thought they're smart enough to say Mevash b'Shabbos b'shogeg yochal b'mezid lo yochal. But v'lo shna, he doesn't even mention shehiyah. He just says you should know if you cook on Shabbos. I remember there was a Rosh Yeshiva who was like this. He told us if you've cooked on Shabbos, it's usher. If you cook b'shogeg, it's mutter. And he's assuming that they should know. And this act of shehiyah, of course, is like cooking on Shabbos. And others say, and this act of shehiyah, of course, it's not like cooking on Shabbos. So that's why you have this machlokas, Rav and Rav Yosef, Travaihu, and Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, giving radically divergent interpretations of what Rabbi Chia bar Abba was trying to hint to them. That's why you have room for this. Okay, I'm sorry. I haven't looked at Art Scroll. Really? Oh, fine. Halacha kedivri Art Scroll, that settles it. So no, I remember this is the one Masechta. We were learning this back in 2005, and I completed learning Shabbos. Remember this as a youngster, the day of my wedding. And Rabbi Bronspiegel had asked me, when we got into later things, he said, go get me a copy of the Art Scroll from the library. He wanted to look up something before Shir one day in the Art Scroll. And that taught me, you could look at Art Scroll sometimes. He said, it gives you a good shot. You know, he would drive his car and go over Gemaras by heart. That's what he was doing while he was driving, just like reciting Gemaras. But he wanted to see what Art Scroll gave him shot, how they did this, because they could do it. And that's why I learned. But I haven't, since coming to Israel, if I look at things, I like looking at the Steinsaltz because it has kudos sometimes and also has bigger print. Well, these are the newer Steinsaltz, which are worse. People don't like Steinsaltz because he changes Surah Sadah from the older editions. But I kind of like that because nice and big. Okay, it's not that I don't need reading glasses, thank God. I just enjoy it better. So what does Art Scroll say there?
It's right out here.
Mother?
Let's get the letter.
He used to say, in the way you're explaining it, that lo shna is not something that he said.
Yeah, Rabbi Chia bar Abba said, but the narrator says.
But the narrator said.
Okay, so there you go. That's how I understood it. I guess maybe I remembered Art Scroll from 18 years ago. I don't know. So
that to me doesn't make sense with the flow of the Gemara.
Oh,
the flow of the Gemara was that they asked a question from Rabbi Avi Grossman.
Yes.
And his response was absolutely nothing. Ishtik, he didn't say anything that night.
And then the next
And the
day,
next day, he didn't respond to it whatsoever. He said.
so why they mention this line?
Cooking on Shabbos. They interpreted it, the low shtar, however, you didn't talk about our question. I'm gonna infer from your not responding to my question that they're both the same.
Really? I understand why they then stuck with this one line from his drasha. He came in, he said, he went out, said one line, and they interpreted this one line as being relevant, an answer relevant to their first question. So obviously this one line,
Correct.
yeah, but he did not address them directly, but they knew that somehow this line does address them, even if indirectly. So that's why we have this interpretation. Yeah.
So, two ways to look at it. Rashi, I like Rashi.
Okay.
With all due respect.
Well, what are you gonna do? Oh, it's bad to be those who disagree with Rashi, like they say, Yado al tachtona. You're already getting off, you're they got a head start. But thank God there are other interpreters. Why is Rashi so good? Because he's so consistent and he does it well. Rabbeinu Chananel came before Rashi, right? And Riff, Rush, and Rambam tell us how to interpret the Gemara without saying it explicitly, but through their psak, so you can understand what they're getting at. Okay, so let's continue here. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, "Lisura mevashahu delo ati lirarume b'shogeg yochal aval hai de'ati lirarume b'shogeg nami lo yochal." His interpretation is that with regards to someone forgetting the shahiyah thing, shahiyah has room for tricksters. Someone's saying, "Oops, I left it on the fire. What are you going to do? I didn't do anything on Shabbos, so I should be able to eat it." So you would think that the sage would say, "You know what? The shogeg lo yochal." This brisa has told us that the straight up case was b'shogeg yochal b'mizid lo yochal, and it was talking about the types of foods that needed to stay on the kira on Shabbos in order to complete the threshold of cooking. Aval chamin shehu chamu kol tzorkan. If you had a cholent that was fully cooked, water that was fully heated up, the tavshil shebishel kol tzorko, fully cooked cholent, bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid yochal divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says that once you're talking about leaving something on the kira on Shabbos, even b'mezid, because it was fully cooked or fully heated, and what happened on Shabbos didn't necessarily involve a straight malacha, even though it might have been not what the sages want you to do. There was no malacha. Already before Shabbos, these foods were fully cooked. So Rav Meir says one can eat the products thereof on Shabbos. Rabbi Yehuda says, the reason for eating or being able to use this hot water is because hot water is technically mitztamik v'ralo. In what way is hot water mitztamik v'ralo? Yeah, it's less. You left enough 4 cups of worth in this pot, and if you leave it on the fire and you say, "Well, I want everybody to have a cup of tea," but by the time you get to it, there's only 3 cups worth. So now everybody's going to get 3/4 of a cup of tea. That's pretty bad. But water is also mitztamik v'ralo for another reason. Nowadays, our water pretty much has very little sediment in it. And if you no one uses the distilled water for anything that tastes kind of flat. Why does water taste good? Because it has trace minerals in it. And you probably noticed, I remember when I first came to Jerusalem 23 years ago, you could still taste the sulfuric minerals in the water. Remember? It had a salty-like taste. I remember coming in from Rehovot. Rehovot has a chalky taste in the water. Jerusalem water has even like a saltiness to it. Do you remember that? And then they got the new water carrier and it stopped. So you used to filter your water with Brita, not to take out stuff, but so just run it through the carbon and give it that good taste. And now the water here basically tastes like plain old tap water, like in America in certain places. And you could go even in New York, in Nassau County, the tap water tastes different than it does in the 5 boroughs. And in New Jersey, in places it tastes differently. In Florida, of course, it tastes differently, right? These are things, because of those minerals. So if you start boiling water, you are raising the concentration of those taste minerals in there. So water that's been boiled for way too long, it's not going to hurt you, but it has more minerals in it. It also causes more of the sediment to form at the bottom. So you could actually taste the difference. I don't know if you're into water. Anybody have this? I'm into water, so this is something that actually bothers me. You boil water too many times, it makes it change. Okay, so that's what Rabbi Yehuda says. And Rabbi Yehuda continues and says, "Tavshil should be shel kot sarko, fully cooked food. Asur, your children, it still is asur. Mipnei it's tamek v'yafelo. It actually improves through the cooking. V'chol it's tamek v'yafelo could go in karuv ufulim uvasar taruf. Any of these mitztamek v'yafelo, like karuv is a cabbage, and fulim is types of beans, and meat taruf. I'm not sure what meat taruf means. Rashi says the gully date the lo the orchim kavayle. It's not for your guests. Okay, but still, I don't know what it means that they I guess they chopped up the meat, or it's I would imagine it's more like a goulash. They don't leave it hard and they cook it in a lot of sauce, so it just improves. If you combine this type of meat with beans, you get what you and I call cholent. So this is already an historical basis for such a thing. You know that anybody here cook cabbage, karuv mi'udeh, or fry the cabbage? If you do that, cut it up fine, put it into a frying pan with oil and salt and some black pepper and some carrots, also grated fine, and just fry that. It gets better with age. Okay, just tip. Even kids like that. So he says that this would have been usher. Mitztamek v'yafalo, usher. Mitztamek ralo would be mutter. The chol mitztamek ralo mutter. He finishes that. We have a case over here. There's what does Rabbi Yehuda say? Rabbi Yehuda doesn't actually address cases of actual cooking. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda is talking about foods that are all fully cooked before Shabbos began. The only question is mitztamek ralo, mitztamek v'yafalo. All his examples. Rabbi Meir apparently is addressing foods that actually cooked into Shabbos. Okay, that is that when the clock struck 7 p.m., let's say that's the cutoff point between Kol and Shabbos, the foods were still not fully cooked. So here's the summation of this kasha. Gatani miha havshil shelo bishel kol sarko. It says up on top, havshil shelo bishel kol sarko was bishogeg yochal. He did a shehiyah and forgot, whatever that and forgot means. The mezid lo yochal bishogeg yochal. So why is that a kasha? On who? Let's read what Rashi says. Gatani miha bishelo bishel kol sarko. When this food wasn't fully cooked before Shabbos, the yesh chiluk bein shogeg lemezid. See, the brisa begins a chiluk shogeg and mezid. The consequences: eat the products or not. B'mashe kasha. Okay, in mashe, if he had left it there before Shabbos, kasha bein l'rabba v'rav Yosef v'sharu b'mezid bein l'rav Nachman the asar shogeg. Remember, this brisa makes a distinction. Brisa says mezid, don't eat. Shogeg, do eat. Whereas Rabbah and Rav Yosef wanted to say either Mezid and Shogeg eat, and Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said Mezid Shogeg, no difference, don't eat. So there is a kasha here. It's a kasha to both of them, and both of them were, like you said, were trying to interpret Rabbi Chia bar Abba. So my own idea was they should have just offered this brisa and be done with it. The answer gives a chiluk, and not have to give an answer. It's all usher or it's all mutter. It doesn't make a difference. Okay, so that's the kasha on these two Amoraic approaches to resolve this question. Okay, and here is an answer offered by the Gemara, but it's still going to be inconclusive. We're going to end with it says kasha, but it doesn't say, let's say tiyufta or anything like that. It says kasha. So I'm jumping ahead. Bish lama the Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak lo kasha. I can resolve this. The kasha gets Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak was machmir. He said, in these cases, you left it on the fire. Shogeg mezid, I don't care. It's usher. You can't eat the products. But the brisa seems to make a chiluk between shogeg and mezid. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, not a kasha. Kan kodem zera, kan la'achar gzera. There is a little bit of history involved here, chronology. One is before the gzera, one is after the gzera. After the gzera, apparently, things got more machmir. Let's read Rashi. V'yishlom Rav Nachman. Matzi l'tarutze ki tanya hahi the shogeg yochal. When this brisa we just brought says shogeg yochal, which doesn't fit with Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, who said shogeg lo yochal lifnei gezerah. The brisa is before the gezerah. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak is talking about after the gezerah. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says everything should be usher. There's a gezerah bin. A gezerah has been enacted, even for you shogeg people. But beforehand, shogeg was yochal. Lifnei gezerah. Damrin on the kaman, we will say shortly. I checked ahead. It's like in 4 lines. Damrin kaman the gazaru ala shochachim. They made a gezerah against these shochachim because, like I said, there is a case of asi. Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak mentioned it. Asi la arume. You could have such a case. He mentioned we found that there were cheaters. There were a lot of people who actually did forget. There are many absent-minded people. But then again, there are also people who are tricksters, and that's why the Gezerah exists. Rav Nachman Yitzchak basically was saying, Asi Larumi, he's describing a case for making a Gezerah if it hadn't been already. The Chi Itmar de Rav Chia Bar Abba, the Tiratzna, Aliba de Shogeg Aser La'achar Gezerah. So when Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak was interpreting Rav Chia Bar Abba, he's assuming there's a Gezerah in here, and we're not going to allow these potential shogegim to happen. We don't want people claiming I forgot. It was an honest mistake. It was working well before Shabbos, and somehow I got caught up, and it was December, so we had to get to shul by 4. So that's not such a kasha against him. Not such a kasha. Perhaps maybe the chronology is off, but whatever. They're going to stick with this. When was this gezerah made? That's a good question. Okay, sometime intervening between this brisa and Rabbi, according to Rabbi, we have to say according to Rav Nachman Yitzchak, the gezerah was made sometime between when the brisa was codified in the brisa and when Rav Chia Bar Abba gave his ambiguous answer. I just heard this week from my chavrusa. He said back in the day when I had never thought of this idea to heat up food. He was alone for Shabbos. He got food from the caterer from Meal Mart, and he said he stuck it all in the microwave before Shabbos and nearly cranked it up, made it nice and piping hot, and just left the microwave, and then unplugged the microwave before Shabbos. And he went to shul. He came back from shul. It was still hot, and that's the way to do it. And I said, "Wow, I never had a havamina to do a thing like that. Why? Because who uses microwaves on Shabbos, or even thinks to implement the microwave as a way of keeping food a little bit hot before Shabbos? We're all thinking in terms of blechs, right? That's what we're used to. You have to put up the thing on the stove, or you have to get the electric thing that we use here in Israel. But I never thought to do that. That sounds like a good idea, actually. If you get to your food in time, it stays hot inside the microwave. I never thought of that. Okay, we still have to answer for Rabba and Rav Yosef. There is a kasha here. Rabba and Rav Yosef said shehiyah. A person left it. He forgot shocheach. Even in mazid, we are not going to punish him. He could eat the results of that food, right? Whereas this brisa made a distinction. If he actually did honestly forget to ruin this shehiyah before Shabbos, so we could still eat it. But if it was mazid, we're not going to let him eat it. And what's the resolution? It's a little bit hard. Okay. Ela Rabba Rav Yosef Damid Lahatera, they are the ones who said, yeah, let him continue eating it. E kodem zera kasha mazid. If they're talking about before any gzera was ever made, so why does the mazid get away with eating this? Because the brisa seems to say that the mazid shouldn't be allowed to eat it. E lachar gzera kasha nami shogeg. And if they agree that this gzera was eventually made, they shouldn't even be allowing or interpreting Rabbi Chia Bar Abba to be allowing someone who's b'shogeg to eat these foods, because now there's a gzera and we don't allow the shogegim to eat it. So that's a kasha, and we're going to leave it there. Because the Gemara does not resolve this. So we're going to have to, like we did the last daf, for certain questions, we're going to have to look elsewhere for the answers. I think what this is showing us is some places they're aware of certain brisas and certain gezeras. It shouldn't be a surprise that some brisas were not known and some gezeras were not known also. Where are gezeras made in Bavel? Was there a place that was making gezeras? Was there like a Sanhedrin-like body in Bavel? So there was the Gaonim, there are Roshei Yeshiva, but there are different communities in Bavel, and sometimes we find that the Gaonim or the Roshei Yeshiva in this major center in Bavel were not accepted in other places where they had other Rabbanim in Bavel. Someone was asking me, I don't want to visit the Emirates. Now people go to the United Arab Emirates a lot, places like that, Dubai, etc., for vacations. A lot of Jews and Israelis, they even have a chief rabbi. So someone said, I don't like them. They're hostile, just like the Arabs here are hostile. Those Arabs are hostile to us also. I was pointing out, Jews have lived in the area of the Emirates since when? Since Galus Bavel. Classically, those areas were greater Bavel. Jews have lived in those areas since basically forever. Avraham Avinu came from those areas also. Where Kasdim is in South Iraq. These places are just south of the border with Iraq. You should know. Kuwait's just below there also. All those areas were always settled, if not super populated, but they've always been there, and Jews have always been in those places. The borders that we see nowadays on the map, those didn't exist in the olden days. Okay, the caravans went there, and Jews were always living in such places. And so now it's just so they were hostile to Israel for a few decades, but now things have come back. I'm not encouraging anybody to go there. I'm just trying to say that it shouldn't be a surprise that Jews have been in and around Abu Dhabi and everything else there. Okay. We're going to have a kasha. We're going to have a question over here. It says here, my gezerta. So what is this gezerah exactly? The Amar Rav Yehuda Bar Shmuel, Amar Rav Yaba, Amar Rav Kahana, Amar Rav. Wow, a long chain going back to Rav. Batchila hayu omrim amavashel b'Shabbos b'shogeg yochal b'mezid lo yochal. Originally it said with regards to someone who actually cooks on Shabbos. Shogeg, he could eat it. Honest mistake. Mezid, he should not eat it. V'hu adin l'shocheach. And so too for someone who forgot. He forgot to cook? No, it means he forgot. And he allowed his cooking process, which he started on Shabbos, which you and I call shahiyah. He set up something that takes a long time to cook, a huge cauldron of cholent. He put it on the fire source, like a kira, before Shabbos, and it needed to stay there for about 6 hours to cook. He put it on 3 hours before Shabbos. That's the shocheach. The din was the same. Misha Rabu Mashin b'mezid. Once it started happening, too many people are mashin b'mezid. They're doing it on purpose. Oh, I forgot. I should have known. I forgot that I left this chillent there, a 6-hour chillent, 3 hours before Shabbos, and I was supposed to come in there and sprinkle ashes on the coals or sweep out the coals or something. I forgot. So they punished the shochachim. Here's a kasha that the Gemara says: Kasha de Rav Meir, ad de Rav Meir, Kasha de Rav Yehuda, ad de Rav Yehuda. Where do we have? Which Rav Meir is contradicting Rav Meir, and which Rav Yehuda is contradicting Rav Yehuda? So thank God for Rashi, because we could be scratching our head, but we do have clues over here. Right in the middle of the page, we mention both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. We said Divri Rabbi Meir, and here we have Rabbi Yehuda interjecting, explaining this brisa. Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda are also, if I'm not mistaken, they show up at the beginning of the parak. Well, yeah. So you go back a few pages. Read Rashi. Rashi says, thank God for Rashi. Ditnan le'el berish pirkin. Oh, hold on. Oh man, where are they calling me? Okay. It says earlier, at the beginning of our parak, the Rabbi Meir aliba de Beis Hillel. Okay, Rabbi Meir explaining Beis Hillel's opinion. And by the way, I put the word hitir. What did they allow? Chamin. They allowed someone to leave the hot water on the kira. Aval lo tavshil, but not a tavshil. V'acha shari chamiv tavshil should be shil kol tzarko. Here, Rabbi Meir in the brisa says that you could put on a tavshil. He put them in one sentence. Chamin shu chumun kol tzarko. The tavshil should be shel kol tzarko. So earlier he didn't mention the tavshil in his explanation of Beis Hillel's opinion, and now he is mentioning tavshil. So that's the kasha of Rav Meir of Rav Meir. Hold on, just want to make sure we're holding the place. And the kasha of Rabbi Yehuda on Rabbi Yehuda is the Hasam earlier. Amar Rabbi Yehuda chamin v'tavshil. He was the one who he had a permission for leaving hot water and let's say a cholent on the kira. The hacha asar. What did he prohibit? Tavshil should be shel kol tzarko. He prohibited a tavshil that's fully cooked if it's mistamek v'yafilo. He prohibited cholents. So that's we need to address this. So the Rav Meir ad Rav Meir lo kasha. You don't need to have a kasha in Rav Meir. He's making a distinction. In some cases, he's talking about lechatchila and habediavad. Lechatchila, he's talking about shehiyah with cham and mutter, and a tavshil's aser. Lechatchila, he distinguishes between hot water and a tavshil. But after the fact, what's after the fact? Not that you could do it. Can you eat the products? After the fact, the products of both are still allowed to be enjoyed on Shabbos. So it's not such a contradiction in Rav Meir. And the resolution of this Rav Yehuda apparent contradiction is Nami lo kasha, kan begrufa uktuma, kan b'she'ena grufa uktuma. When he had his split teaching above, okay, it depends on the case. What did Rav Yehuda say? I'll read Rav Yehuda's rules that are split. Rav Yehuda says, Chamin shehu chamu kol tzarkan mutarim mipnei shemitztamek v'iralo, tav shel shabishel kol tzarko asr mipnei shemitztamek v'yafelo. He gave, sometimes it's mutter, sometimes it's asr. That is talking about what? Grufa and ktuma. Let me read it right. Grufin Ketuma. Kan B'Shena Grufin Ketuma. When he prohibits everything, the Gzera that's prohibitory, it's ain't a Grufin Ketuma, everything should be prohibited. Right? Say that right? Is that what it fits there? Okay. So what does Rashi say? Is there a Rashi here that we missed? Halachat I'll read you what Rashi says with the Halachat Chila, and then we'll read the next Rashi, which explains Rabbi Yehuda. Mishnah Kamaisa of Rabbi Meir says, that's the original Mishnah. Lishhot lechat chila kamairi. It's talking about, can I leave these foods on the fire? So some yes, some no. There is a distinction. That's you asked before the fact. And when we say that it's all mutter according to Rabbi Meir, it's talking about it happened already. He already left it on the fire. Kvar ka'amar demutter lo'ochla. Okay, so there's some things you shouldn't have left on the fire according to Rabbi Meir, but after the fact you could eat. Here's the big Rashi, kan begrufa of tuma, Rabbi Yehuda's distinction. Hahi dila el iri above. What's it talking about? Begrufa of tuma, talking about a kira that had been properly blecht, as I like to say. Kidikatani ba mashin al gabe grufa tuma, because it says in the Mishnah you could leave food on properly swept out or covered blech or kira. Ve'ein mashin al she'ena grufa, and you can't leave food on the one that's not been blecht. Uma hain mashin al grufa sheitarnu lishoth. And what can you leave on this grufa, this proper blech that we permitted? Rameir Omer, what he said. Hilkach afilu chachila. Therefore, even chachila shari Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda would allow certain cases. We just didn't see it explicitly here. V'acha kishe'ena grufa hilkach diavad urser. Okay. When he didn't have a blech, Rabbi Yehuda would say, sorry, you were supposed to blech if you wanted to enjoy the heter after the fact. Because you did not even do what you were supposed to do beforehand, the products are prohibited. Okay, so I think that's good resolution to at least this kasha of Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, a smart enough student. I remember there was a fellow I went with learning back at yeshiva. You presented like this kasha. He's like, well, it's obvious that in that case, Rabbi Meir was talking about l'chachila. What's if you ask him what I can do and what I can't do. But when he gave a blanket heter, he was talking about eating the products. And it was also, he already knew the answer. Some smart students already know the answer. They don't see a contradiction. They could understand this right away. I'm just saying, I had a friend like that. Thank God. Some people have a better Gemara cup and pick these things up better than others. The only question is, if you have a Gemara cup, are you going to put it to use or are you going to squander it? And the hefek, some people don't have such Gemara cups, so it takes them. They can't do daf yomi. So it takes them a while to do a whole page, and then God willing, you see results. That's most of us. And it holds us. We have to just keep trying. Even if it takes 4 hours to do a single daf, or 4 days to do a daf, you still got to do it. And I'm talking about an umid here when I say daf. Let's see. There's another question over here. Ibaylahu avar v'shaha mai. Okay, what is the bottom line? A person left food on the blech when he was not supposed to. What is the status of the products? Could we eat it? Rashi says, Avar v'shaha b'mezid. He adds the word mezid. You see that? Yeah, b'mezid. Avar v'shaha b'mezid. I want a bottom line. Avar v'shaha, Rashi is assuming b'shogeg, a real shocheach. So products are mutter. B'mezid, what's the case? Mutter la'ochla or not? Let's read it with Rashi. Avar v'shaha b'mezid, mai. Mutter la'ochla or not? So the Gemara says, they give examples. My kinasu rabbanon olo. Do the rabbis fine him? But in this case, it would be punishment. Usually, knas is make him pay some money. But in this case, he's not paying any money. It means that he won't be able to enjoy the fruits of his insidious labor. And the Gemara answers with a tashma. The Amar Shmuel Bar Nathan, Amar Rav Chanina. Shahalach Rabbi Yosef Tzipori, Matzach Amin Shenishtahu al Gabi Kira, V'Loasar Lehen. He came to Tzipori, for whatever reason, I guess he didn't show up on Shabbos because he didn't travel on Shabbos. But he'd been staying there for Shabbos, and he discovered on Shabbos morning that there had been some food on the Kira, right? It says Chamin Shenishtahu al Gabi Kira, means hot water on the Kira on Shabbos. V'Loasar Lehen. He did not prohibit them from using this water. What could they have done differently? Apparently, they had left it. They had over v'shaha, and it had at the time they had left it. It was not fully hot, and it's kind of obvious that these water only got hot enough to really use on Shabbos. That was the case. It was amazing. So he still allowed them to use it. Beitzim, what? Yeah, b'mezid. Rashi adds b'mezid. And beitzim mitzuma koch nishtahu al gabi kira v'asar lahed. And there were some shriveled eggs that had been left on the kira, and those he prohibited because he realized that those are mitztamik v'yafelo, and they had put it up on the fire, I guess, without enough time on Shabbos to allow them to fully cook, and it wasn't done properly. So my love, and they're assuming the Oto Shabbos. So they're saying that he didn't let them eat this. Must have been that Shabbos he didn't let them eat this, right? So that seems to be the way they understand this. The Havaminas understands that Shabbos, the products of this act of leaving the eggs on the blech before Shabbos in a way that was prohibited by the sages resulted in a product that they could not eat that Shabbos. And the other voice of the Gemara says, "Lo, the Shabbos haba." It means he let them eat this food. The Shabbos haba, he told them, and don't do this again. Don't do this again, because the Chachli are not supposed to leave the eggs like this, but the eggs themselves don't become prohibited for consumption on the Shabbos you did this. So there you go. It's is this a bottom line, by the way, type of answer? I don't know. It's a difference of opinions how to interpret what happened. So I don't think we got to a bottom line at this point. The poskim don't use this necessarily as a source of halacha because you could interpret it one way. When he found these beitzim mitzumilkot on the blech on Shabbos or on the kira on Shabbos, is the nature of the prohibition that said you can't eat them this Shabbos, knas. Or do you say, don't do this again next Shabbos? Yeah. So like anybody ever have that case? Also, Erev Tavshilin is coming up. Now we keep going back to Yontif. You have the fellow who didn't make an Erev Tavshilin. So what does he do come Yontif if he wants to prepare anything for Shabbos? Technically speaking, he didn't make an Erev Tavshilin. There's a lot he can't do for Shabbos. So what's his backup plan? So someone was supposed to make an Erev Tavshilin for him. So the rabbi is supposed to do it for the community. But that works for the person who's negligent once. So let's say he's negligent a second time. We're afraid he's just not going to care and not want to do himself. So that person has a knas. You can't rely on it. How many passes do you get? Yontif doesn't happen that often. I checked in the calendar. Yontif's only happened in Tishrei, Nisan, and in Sivan. And not only that, it turns out in this country we never really make an Erev Tavshilin on Sukkot because of the calendar. There's no Erev Tavshilin for Sukkot in this country. And even when we do it on Rosh Hashanah, it's a little bit iffier. At least, you still have to do it, but it's why do we keep a second day? And it's assuming that Friday is going to be Yontif for Rosh Hashanah, but then we have the question: why are we keeping 2 days of Yontif here in Israel, especially in Jerusalem? Really, it's a kasha. The point is, how many times does a person get a pass? You could say maybe if he forgot in 1976, and then 70 years later, whatever it is, or now it's almost 50 years later, he forgets again. We said it's enough time in between that he's not considered negligent or lo shna. I don't know, but you can't. How many times can you get away with something? Question: I haven't seen an answer. If anybody has any clues about it, or maybe we should have an about this one. Don't forget to make your Erev Tavshilin on Thursday this year. Okay, another question here. Technical question. So that sounds a little bit surprising. The Gemara is asking this bitmiha. Bayahi. That's like Rashi says, bayahi. And by the way, I think Rashi normally says bitmiha, right? But here it says baya, it's a question. And it's funny because Rashi's word for question, using the Aramaic word for question, is also related to the Aramaic word for egg, right? Yeah. So, yeah, I wonder if that's a play on words there. So the question is, wait, you're telling me eggs are mitamic, are in the category of a food that's shrivels and it's better? I think so. Damar Rav Chama Bar Chanina Hamachat. One time, Nitharachti Ani v'Rabi l'makom echad. One time we were guests in a particular place. V'heviu lefanenu beitzim mesumakot ke'uz radim, and they had eggs as shriveled as these hawthorn apples. It turns out that British name hawthorn is talking about these little types of berries that they call hawthorns, and we ate many of them. V'achalnu mehen harbe, and you could actually try doing this at home. Just keep your eggs on top of a cholent or something like that for a very long time, and you'll see they shrivel quite well. And you could even, at a certain point in the process, remove the shells and just put them on top of the cholent and let them continue. And you'll see a nice shriveling process. They get quite good. I don't know anybody does this nowadays, but I've seen people eat, let's say, eggs that were on the cholent for 2 days, and they're quite good. Well, let's talk about the Tanai Chazara. You ever have this case? Take the cholent off the blech, at least the classical blechs we had. So look, you could want to just take some, but you want to put it back. So what do? How many conditions do you have to keep in order to keep that cholent to be able to put it back? And what can't you do? You can't serve it directly from the blech, right? So the Ramah has 4 conditions. We're going to see that many of these conditions come up in the Gemara. And really, if you're machmir, because we're dealing with something that could potentially be cooking on Shabbos, you can understand why you keep all 4 conditions. And if we had time, we'd see also the Vilna Gaon has an amazing what to say. Okay. What does it say here? A few lines. Beis Hillel Omrim Af Machzirim. Beis Hillel said about the kira that's grew from Ketum, at least according to our version of the Mishnah, you could even take something off of the blech and put it back on. Wait a minute. We're going to say on Shabbos itself, he took it off and he puts it back on Shabbos, or he took it off right before Shabbos, now he wants to put it back on. Both of those cases come up in the discussion. So let's turn the page, go to Lamed Chesed and Beis. And for those keeping score at home, here it is. Walmer Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes said, Divrio Omer Machzirin, Afilu b'Shabbos. You could put it back on Shabbos. You could put it back even on Shabbos. What does that mean? Even on Shabbos. So I understand. Are we talking about what's done on Shabbos? If I was talking about, I took it off the kira on before Shabbos and I put it back on before Shabbos, what's the chiddush? Yeah, it must be on Shabbos. Rashi says, Biyom Macharas. It means tomorrow. It means Shabbos day. V'lo tema plutayu misha chashecha. Okay, don't say that the argument is from when it starts getting dark at the beginning of Shabbos. Well, what? I'm sorry. Well, what's the question here? We'll open up the Steinsaltz also. I think there was a note about something. They had a question about machzirin, right? So I understand that putting something on the blech on Shabbos is a little bit strange. Why? Like I said, I said a few days ago, Rambam, for example, said, whatever you do before Shabbos, whatever you set up before Shabbos, that's totally fine. Hands off on Shabbos. And then we just talked about, he was so hands off that it looks like he's even doing this too much on purpose. He left something he really shouldn't have left on Shabbos to cook into Shabbos. And he's forgetting that the sages put some Tanayim for him to do. Let's say, blech the kira. He should do something to the kira before Shabbos. And now he just left it on there. And we think that maybe he's trying to pretend that he forgot it. Remember, that's just what we talked about, Shehiyah and Shachach. And now I would have said that to put something on, that's something that's not on a kira on Shabbos, to put it onto the kira certainly should be prohibited. But the Chiddush of Beis Hillel says, af machzirin. So the question is, when they allow, whenever you have a heter like this, af machzirin, we have to ask, how much do they allow this? The allowance. How open, to what extent do they allow this? And we always have to ask that question. The question is, to what extent do we allow it? And that's why it says, afilu b'Shabbos. You could even do this on Shabbos. And we say, yeah, Shabbos day. Shabbos itself, if you have allowance, as long as you're keeping the conditions we're going to discuss.
The condition aside,
yeah.
What's the big deal? After Machzirin, the Mishnah told us that we're permitted on Shabbos to put food back on the stove. Was
it a surprise? We just got through a discussion saying that if he left it there, he never even touched it on Shabbos. He left it before Shabbos and he forgot it. That is questionable. So of course I can't take something that's not on the kira at all and leave it there.
It's questionable.
I know, but we figured out it's questionable. That's why the Gemara, we're students of the Gemara. We just finished the sugya talking about Shachach Shehiyah. And now you're telling me Machzirin.
Because he didn't Baruch Nikotsu. That's because
that was the answer. Okay, so I'm trying to say that when we say Machzirin Afil b'Shabbos, what we have to say is we have to know the extent to allow Chazara. Chazara isn't saying you could just do. So Chazara is something you have to know the limits thereof, and you have to know. Yeah, there has to be parameters You have to find it. So here he says, Machzirin afilu b'Shabbos. Okay? Well, the Chiddush is that it's even on during the day. What's the Chiddush? At night, you could say, well, it's pretty hot still. It doesn't look like an act of cooking. But putting something on during the day, Havamina, a lot of time has passed. It's been maybe there's been a flare up. Maybe the food is not hot. Maybe somehow the initial act of cooking that was before Shabbos has been reversed. With hot water, this is certainly the case. Why? I still use a kettle at home. A kettle sitting on the blech. The kettle has hot water. If someone were to take the kettle off that blech for a few minutes, it loses its temperature, and putting it back on the blech would be an act of cooking, ostensibly, because there's nothing to it. Once water cools down, the next act of heating this water is considered a new act of cooking, which would be a prohibition, a malacha on Shabbos. So that's the Chiddush. And they continue, says, V'af Rav Ushaya Savar, Ach Machzirin Afilu B'Shabbos. This needs to be said. Even Rav Ushaya holds that Chazara can be performed on Shabbos. What was the case? Sir Amar Rav Ushaya. Amar Rav Ushaya. Hamacha Saidu Omdim Le'ela Me Rav Chia Rabba. One time we were standing over Rav Chia Bar Abba. What does it mean? Omdim Al Rav Chia Bar Abba. It doesn't mean that they were. Normally it says Yatve Kameh. Sometimes we were standing before. We use the word come, and sitting before them means to study. Omdim Al is an expression that's referred to in Avram Avinu. It says Avram Avinu had guests, so he was literally standing over them. The literal interpretation of the story of Avram Avinu is that he was receiving guests and giving them achnasas orchim. Although even there, Onkelos and the Zohar say that it means he was an act of devotion. This was the way he imagined himself offering sacrifice to God. But in this case, then again, when tzaddikim sit and eat, and they eat properly, and they say their brachas at a nice table, that sort of can also transforms the table into like a mizbeach, right? In this case, it means omdim al. He was actually serving him food. He wasn't there for study, but he still managed to learn halacha from him. We're gonna have to go, so I wish everybody a Chag Sameach, and I look forward to studying the sugya with you, gentlemen, sometime. Because maybe I'll ask Rabbi Nadel to just skip to the Mishnah, because there is what to say about this. Some pretty eye-opening things.
Thank you very much.
Have a good one, everybody.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.